Caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's is a challenging journey. You want to provide the best possible care, but it can be so overwhelming, both physically and emotionally. Imagine facing this challenge in the prime of your life. Join me as I talk to Irene, who cared for her spouse with early onset Alzheimer's. Their young age made getting help even more challenging. Hear what happened when a neurologist told her she needed to move her husband to memory care. We'll discuss the warning signs and explore how making this difficult choice of memory care can be an act of love for both yourself and your loved one. All of this and more on Fading Memories, your caregiver best friend. Oh, welcome back, Fading Memories listeners. You know, I appreciate you giving me a little bit of your time every week, and I aim to make that absolutely worthwhile. Today, I am talking to Irene Walker. She cared for her husband who had early onset Alzheimer's, and she's going to tell her story and the challenges she faced that led up to a neurologist telling her she absolutely had to make a very difficult choice. So, thanks for joining me, Irene.
Thank you so much for having me and letting me tell my story. And I hope it helps some lovely caregivers out there because I know that it is a journey and a half to be a caregiver, no matter what age you are. But I really appreciate you giving me the time.
Well, thank you so much. And I know so many people promise to never move their loved one to any kind of care home, which they do out of love. My mom always said, I don't want to be a burden. I'm going to live in my home forever, which always hurt my brain because those were mutually exclusive. And I knew she did not want to go to memory care. So it was very difficult to have to make that choice because I knew I was going against mom's wishes, which none of us ever really want to do unless we're total rebels. But I also knew that that was the best thing for everybody, her, the family. And thankfully, I was not wrong in that choice. So I would love to hear your story because technically my mom had early onset Alzheimer's, but she wasn't diagnosed until she was like seriously middle of this disease in the progression. And at that point she was 69, almost 70. I can't do math today. But she was close, but she'd had it for quite a while beforehand. So it's definitely a little more challenging when they're younger. So tell us your story because it is a really good one.
Well, for me, I had never been exposed to dementia, Alzheimer's at all. So I wouldn't even have known the warning signs. I did notice that before his diagnosis, that he was kind of going into his own little world. He was pulling himself away from the family. He really only used to watch TV, go on his computer. He would forget things. Um, but again, we all forget things. We'll come walking down the stairs and go, "Oh my gosh, what was so geez." Then you go walking back up the stairs and you're like, "Oh yeah, that's right." So I really didn't realize those telltale signs at all. And the more you educate yourself, of course, the better you know these things. Um, but he was going into a depression, and I took him to my family doctor, and she gave him some medication for depression, and that seemed to work out great. He was coming out of depression, things were wonderful. It was almost like the perfect storm because he was an IT contractor, so he wasn't getting as many jobs in IT. And IT is always changing. And I kept on saying, you got to take more courses, you got to do stuff, you got to do this. And he was not realizing that it was all too much for him. And he wasn't doing that. So he was missing out on opportunities. And it was also changing at such a rapid pace that he wasn't able to work a lot. So then that's when he went into his depression. And then we took him to the doctors. And again, the doctor gave him medication for that. But then I noticed after a couple of months of that, he still was like very forgetful. Like he didn't even know what day of the week it was. When you're
Mm.
in that holiday mode, if you're not working, you do forget sometimes what day of the week it is. But I thought this is not right. This is unusual. So we went back to the doctors and she sat there and heard my story. And then she asked my husband, there's 3 words, give them back to me. And he couldn't give the 3 words back, only 2 of them.
Mm.
Wow. And then she said, I want you to draw 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock or whatever the time was. So he drew, it looked like Big Ben. So it was like a house with a roof. And then he drew the numbers on the outside of the clock. And I looked and I'm like, what is that? And she said, I think he has early onset dementia. And
Oof.
no. So for me, I was totally like, no, 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 it can't be it. No, 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 no. Right? It's the whole denial thing.
Who could blame
Um,
you?
right, because I was like, he's way too young, and there's just no way. Nobody in his family has it. Nobody in my family has it, of course. That wouldn't affect him, but there's just no way. So then, after a month, it finally settled with me. So he went on medication, and throughout the whole journey, my children, our children were younger, so and I didn't want to expose them to understand fully what was going on with their dad because I still wanted them to enjoy their dad and bring friends over and have a fairly regular childhood. So I'd say, oh, he just has a memory problem. He's going to be fine. He's taking medication for it and all that sort of stuff. But he couldn't drive. And he was fairly happy at those points. And then as time went on, he relied more and more and more on care. And because he was younger, he didn't qualify for a lot of care. And so it was a lot of out of pocket for me. So I'm trying to work and go here and take the kids there and make sure he's okay. And then there was a point where you can't really leave him alone, and then you need to hire people. And then the government definitely helped us to a certain point, but there's only so much that they can do because there's so many people, and it's like a triangle, right? There's only so many people able to help, right? So then I was taking him to a specialist neurologist, and then he was starting to go every 6 months. So he would have been probably after the diagnosis, I would say maybe 5 years in of me taking care of him, 5 or 6 years. And then I was like physically, emotionally, I was totally drained because he did not sleep well at night. And so he'd be up every 2 hours. So then I would get up every couple of hours.
Oof.
I still had to work, right? And still had to, you know, tend to the kids and all that sort of stuff. And you, as a caregiver, tend to shut people out yourself, right? It is a very isolating thing when you're a caregiver because your focus is really on the person you're taking care of. You're not taking care of yourself. You are financially burdened. You are totally stressed out, and you yourself are going into a depression. But you're just getting up every morning, one foot in front of the other, and doing what you have to do in order to get the job done. So, on one of the visits, the last visit to the neurologist, she checked him out and all that sort of stuff. And he was starting to get agitated with everything, right? And I was trying to keep it as simple as possible for him, trying to always keep it happy and cheery. We used to call him, he was footering. He loved to footer. I still find things like in files that he's put like a nail or something that doesn't belong. I find it absolutely hysterical. So it's probably him just saying hello, I'm sure. Um, but he was starting to get agitated with us. And I kept on thinking, this is not him. This is the disease. Um, he's slowly leaving me, and it's just this disease that's taking over him. And there's nothing that we can do about it except accept it and keep it as nice and keep him as safe as possible. So when I sat down and took him to the neurologist, she said to me, how are you doing? And I was like, oh, me, oh, fine, fine. She said, you're not doing fine. You're not doing fine at all. And she said, you can't do this anymore. And she said, he is at this level and he should be in a care facility because you can't do this anymore. And I was like, no, yeah, I'm sure I can. And she's like, no. I said, yeah, but I'm young. I should be able to. She's like, no, you're not. You're not able to take care of him. You are going on fumes. So what you're going to do is you're going to call. So there was a branch of government that dealt with this. She says, you're going to call this number. I'm going to call them too, and I'm going to tell them she cannot do this anymore, and they have to find a place for him ASAP. And I was like, are you sure? She's like, yeah, because otherwise you're going to be checking yourself into this hospital in the psychiatric ward because you can't do this anymore. I was like, what? So I called and I told them, there's no way I can do this anymore. And I'm either going to check us both in or him in or me into the hospital. And within half an hour, I received a call and they said, you have 24 hours to decide whether you want to place him in this facility or not. And I said, I'm giving my answer now. Yes, I will. So when I took him to the facility, first of all, I told him, I'm like, we're gonna go. It's a playtime. Like everything for me with him had to be really happy because I didn't want him, you know, angry, right? Because then that gets very scary. So I was just
Mm-hmm.
trying to keep everything happy and look at where, and I'm in the meantime like, oh. Um,
Dying
so
a little bit inside.
right, crying. Oh my God. I did not sleep that night at all. So then we get to the facility and I tell them, if you can take him, I know there's a bunch of paperwork that I have to do. And she said, yep, we're going to take him up and don't do the big goodbyes because it'll confuse him because they don't understand what's going on. They're trying so hard to understand any little thing, let alone giving a big, dramatic goodbye to them. So they took him away and, put him in a program and he was apparently, he was young, he was handsome. All the ladies loved him. So they were his friend while he was there. And the woman came back who was running it and she said, he should have been here. I've been doing this a long time and he should have been here a long time ago. Like you kept him at home probably far too long. And I think that's what we do too as caregivers because you know, we feel like that it is going to be the best care. Nobody can take care of him the way I can take care of him. And it is true enough. But the problem is you are so burnt out. You are not taking care of yourself. Therefore, you are not really giving the best care to that person, you know? So yeah, that was my story. And then when I came back, I was big on journaling, and I was reading all my journals, and they're all pretty weepy and sad and stressed. And I thought, that's not how I want that energy and how I want him remembered because he was a lovely man and we did have a lovely life. So I started to write, and one thing led to another, and I wrote a book. So yeah, I'm hoping that helps people. I think it does, but it did help me. It was very cathartic. So yeah.
I'm going to rewind kind of almost back to the beginning. So you said some of the early signs whilst he was working less. So he's technically withdrawing from work. He's withdrawing socially, which is one of the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's, which of course you had absolutely no need to understand or pay any attention to, which is totally understandable. Um, it's it's a sign that's easy to dismiss, especially when they're younger. So my mom she wasn't withdrawing from work or social events, but she was having difficulty completing normal tasks mostly, and regular listeners know this. We had a 1 hour photo lab and a portrait studio as a family, and she would take orders from clients and not write down due dates or pertinent details that made doing their order properly the first time before they came back to pick it up. And it was always this one gal was just, she was the poor guinea pig that she got to the point where she would just open the door and look at us and be like, oh crap again. And it got to that point where I started becoming like the helicopter caregiver. I didn't consider myself a caregiver until 6 months after my dad had died. when I attended my first caregiver support group, and the facilitator said, even if your loved one is in a community, if they're living with their spouse, or if, any of these scenarios, if you're doing these kind of tasks, you're a caregiver. And I was like, oh, and I'm sure, because I should state that Irene is in Canada. So when she talks about the government, she's not talking about our government, at least,
Yeah.
at least for the
All right.
American listeners.
Right.
It's kind of similar, but I'm not sure we would have gotten approval in half an hour, maybe a day or so, but it
Mm.
wouldn't have been half an hour, I'm pretty sure. I don't know. I didn't have that experience. I can retell my memory care story, but now I've lost my train of thought. I hate it when I do that. I
So signs
sidetracked
at the
myself to
beginning. Uh,
oh yeah. Well,
yeah.
so I got to the point where I had to, hover. And if she started chitty chatting with clients, I'd have to go and basically stick my nose in between the two of them and like, oh, so what are we doing for Irene today? And like moving the order towards me so I could ask questions like, hey, Irene, what's your phone number? Just details. And one day she, because I worked in the back, I worked in the dark room. This was like the old days. We did have a digital machine, but we still printed by hand the wall-sized pictures. And one day she didn't recognize her handwriting on an order she took with no details. And she said, oh, that's such and such employees. And I was like, oh, dear God. The employee and my mom did not have similar handwriting at all. And you'd think we would have started making plans at that point. My grandmother had vascular dementia. My aunt was caring for her. They were living on my grandmother's Social Security. Not really sure how that was a choice. Planning ahead for care was not in my family's repertoire, which I don't understand, but it's pretty common. So, you obviously didn't have any need to plan for that kind of thing, because how old was he when he was
he was
diagnosed?
diagnosed when he was 51, but he was
Oof.
definitely sick like years before that. I remember one Valentine's Day, I called him and I said, you were supposed to make plans. Where are we going for dinner? And he's like, well, I don't know. What do you mean, where are we
Why?
going for dinner? Like, exactly, like why? And I like, guess it's Valentine's Day. Oh, shit. Well, he didn't say that. But anyway, he cursed and he's like, okay, I'm just trying to finish stuff up at work. I'll be home. So this is when he was still working. And I think he stopped at a gas station and bought like one of those cards that was in the window, those self-serve. Half of it was like sun bleached and the other half, anyways. And he gave it to me and he like signed it, like his signature, like R blah 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 blah. And I
Oh,
think this to be I'm like, I know your last name.
yeah.
Like, what did you do at work? Did you sign everything Love Robert? Like, why did I get a signature like an R? And he was like, you worry about the weirdest things. Like, oh, okay. So, but when you do look back, um, you do see those particular signs, a lot of forgetfulness. Like the family would be standing waiting to go out, and he's like, oh, I forgot my keys, and I'll go upstairs and get them. And then, we're waiting and waiting. It's like winter, we got our coats on, we're hot. I go upstairs and he's like got his coat off and he's shaving. I'm like, dude, shit, like we have to go. And he's like, oh yeah, I just noticed that. Whereas he probably didn't need to shave, but because I was so busy, the kids were younger, I didn't really focus on him. I just was like, oh my God, it's all about him and blah 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 blah. And like he was just trying his best, right? But he
Mm-hmm.
was drowning. Like he was totally drowning in that world and not understanding enough to tell me like I feel like I can't cope or manage. It is just they do just kind of shut down. And he did a lot of his, I guess, when we ended up he passed away 3 years ago. And we ended up doing he wanted to donate his brain. I remember him telling me, I want to donate my body and blah, 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 long, long before any of this. So we donated his brain for research for Alzheimer's, and he had temporal, so
Yeah,
it changes.
frontal temporal.
Yeah. So it totally changes their personality, their speech, how they interact with people, social skills. So there was a lot of missed words, but he used to go "Bip-a-dip-bop-a-dip," but like he would just be gibber, right? But it would be kind of funny gibber, and I'd be like, oh boy, what are you trying to say? Like,
That's
well,
like when we say thing like that thingy, that
like the thing in
thingamabobber.
the jig. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it
Like
was
I
more
was
like a
trying to remember. Yeah, I was
and I'd be like, dear Lord, what was that?
yeah, that
So
would
we all
be
kind of laugh, but not realizing that he was struggling. He didn't know what those particular words were. He didn't know how to express that. So um I think people who are on the outside, if you're relying on that person to tell you, they're not going to tell you because they don't know. But the people on the outside will recognize. And sometimes if you're kind of knee deep in with the person and somebody new kind of comes along and says, well, that seems weird. And you're like, I don't know. He always talks like that. Oh, well, I don't remember him talking like that. Or so almost like a third party sometimes helps you. Um, but yeah, the telltale signs were, his lack of being able to work, him going into a depression, because that really is hand in hand when you do have dementia, and that dementia umbrella has all the different
yeah.
Alzheimer I mean, it's got a gazillion and one things going on there. Um, so yeah, I mean, just to try and make yourself aware as to, how that person is reacting to things, and just taking care of yourself, I find is the main thing, which is the hardest thing as a caregiver. I mean, the majority of caregivers are women, right?
Yep.
That's where the majority of people out there, and the biggest, I think we're all under 65, I think the majority of us. And then I think a third of us are over 65 who are the caregivers. So, it is a lot of young people that are taking care of their spouse or their loved ones who do have that dementia. And it sets your whole world upside down. It totally does. For me, I had to learn to forgive him, and then I had to learn to forgive the disease, and then I had to learn to forgive myself because you're the hardest on yourself, right? Oh, I should
Yeah.
have done this, or I should have seen that, or a lot of shouldas, couldas, and you can't. You got to let that go, right?
One of the things I find really interesting, because we're both moms, like self-care when you're caring for a spouse or an aging parent is almost viewed kind of like selfish. Like, why are you going to the gym? Like, your mom needs you or your husband needs you. But it's totally normal when you have kids. Like, caregiving is kind of caregiving. I don't understand why there's a difference. It's very
Right.
strange. And I guess maybe it's because children, I don't, what's the right word? They become more independent, but like I remember so I'm the oldest grandkid on both sides. I have cousins that are closer to my daughter's age than to mine, but my cousins on my dad's side of the family, they're about, let's see, 14, 16 years younger than me, the oldest one. So my two cousins on my dad's side of the family would babysit my daughter. But like asking somebody to take care of my mom for an afternoon so I could work or do whatever, gosh, why was that so hard? It's just like I don't understand. And I think we need to have more conversations about why we allow society or ourselves or both to basically say, no, you don't get to do this. And you don't, your mom or your husband, they get 100% of your energy. I'm like, that doesn't even make any sense. So that's one of those
No,
things
no,
that
no.
keeps me up at
You're
night.
no, yeah, that is totally right. And that it's harder being a caregiver to somebody who is sick than it is for your children, because it is way more intense, right? With that whether a parent or a spouse, or it is way more intense than it is when you're, a mom taking care of your kids, and not knocking moms. I love moms. I'm a mom. I love being a mom. I'm still a mom. My kids are like in their 20s, but um they you're right. I think society kind of looks down at you. It's like, well, you should just be doing that. That's your job. And it's like, I'm a realtor, right?
Mhm.
So that's my personality, and all my attributes are like in sales. It's not so much in caregiving, but you do what you have to do in order, to manage your life and get through your life and take care of your spouse. But it's not for everyone. Like not
Mm-mm.
everybody has those set skills, and you're not taught them. You're
No,
thrust
not at
into
all.
it. You know, it's like this is what you're doing, and this is what the day is going to happen. And whether you like it or not, you have to deal with it. So it's tough. Like it's my heart goes out, um, to caregivers at no matter what stage, whether at the beginning or near the end or in the middle. It is really, really hard. And I just, you hope um, that people recognize and can help out a little bit more, um, than even just a kind word,
Yeah.
at the grocery store, makes a heck of a lot of difference. Helping somebody with their bags to their car. I've done that many a time when you see, people just struggling sometimes with life. So, um, we have to also
I have a
remember that,
grocery
like,
store story. So we
oh,
went back in my photography days. I had a really good clients who had three kids. The younger two were fraternal twins, boy girl twins, and the son, the youngest son, was very severely autistic. So I learned a lot about dealing with autistic people while I was also caring for my mom or dealing with my mom in the earlier years. And now when I go to the grocery store, and like my daughter was a really easy kid. Like that's why I have one, because I'm like, this is not happening twice. I was a really easy kid. My sister, totally other opposite end of the spectrum. So that was the one thing I learned from my mom was like, don't assume it was just because I'm such a great parent. Nope. My daughter was easy. She slept 5 hours at a night, 5 hours at a time the day she came home from the hospital. So it was not me. So when I was younger and some kids throwing a complete tantrum in the store, I'd be like, oh, come on, lady, it's your kid in order. It's like, this is good. Like negative thoughts about that situation would go through my head. Now I've had instances where it's like, I bet you that person's neurodivergent. I'm just going to smile and
mhm.
mind my own business. If there's some help I can provide, great, but I probably can just do the best by not making more of the situation than is already happening. And we were camping and a family parked next to our trailer, and it was obvious that one of their teenage children had were neurodivergent. And my husband was like, "Oh dear," because he was loud and not understanding neurodivergent people very well. A little bit, I don't want to say scary, but a little unsettling. That's the right word. And I just said, you just have to think of him like we dealt with my mom. It's kind of the same thing. And when he thought about it, he's like, yeah, you're right. And I'm like, see, it's not that big a deal. And there was no problem. So it's really interesting how that's one way that my mom's dementia, Alzheimer's improved my my personhood. Now I'm not so now I wasn't very judgy to begin with before, but now it's like I'm way more open minded on this person's having a really bad day because of whatever. I don't know. And so I just move on. I don't even think negative thoughts anymore.
Yeah, it's building that empathy, right? Empathy is something that is taught, that is not something that we're all born with. So
No, and
it
it
is
helps to
building.
understand. I mean, it's really easy to see a kid screaming and throwing a fit and just assuming that they're being a brat and not assume, oh, they're, neurodivergent. It's just, but now that I've dealt with so many neurodivergent people, it's like, oh, okay, maybe that's the problem. And they can't help that. So let's not be judgy. So I wanted to ask, do you have any idea what that neurologist saw in you that had them make that statement? Because I think that's kind of a brave thing for them to say, um, you could have gotten a little agitated with.
Right. Well, I think when I look back, I was just barely hanging on. So she probably saw, I mean, I was disheveled. I was, you know, not with it whatsoever, trying to put your best foot forward. Um, but she probably saw me just honestly depressed, right? And saw him at a stage where, um, you know, dementia doesn't get better. You don't get
Nope.
better with dementia. It just progressively gets worse and worse and worse. And as she said, he's at the top here. Like, um, you're saying he's starting to get agitated. Well, soon that's going to turn. And when he did go into a care facility, he was attacking nurses and police and
Yikes.
were called in. So it really, I was very thankful that she did that for me because it would have been, me and my kids, right? So she saw how he was and she saw how I was. And, um, you know, I just assumed I didn't have a choice. My family didn't live around me. They live in the States and I live in Canada. So I didn't have that support from them. So I was on my own doing all this stuff. And, you know, should have brought him to a facility a lot sooner, because I would have preferred to have been his wife than his caregiver. And if he's in a facility, then you are his wife and you're not his caregiver. You leave that job to professionals, right? So,
I always thought of myself as the captain of mom's care team. Like I
mm,
was still in charge. Maybe I was only in my mind. um, but we had to work together as a team. And I
yeah, you
kind of
have to be
picked
an
that up.
advocate. Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, but I also witnessed other families being, very persnickety and very demanding. And just, it was like, do you people not realize that you're leaving this loved one here with staff that you have just pissed off? Like, this does not make sense. This is like pissing off the babysitter and leaving your kid with them. Not smart. Like,
Yeah.
please use your brain. Like, I know this is memory care, but your brain should still be working. And
Yeah.
just observing situations where, the family members like myself would treat the staff like they were the employees to them. I'm like, no, they're not here to do crap for you. Yes, they need to work with you, but they're not here for you. I don't care how much we're spending. Yeah, it's ungodly, but and I don't know how. I mean, just maybe I was just tired, but it's just like maybe I was desperate not to have my mom move in with me. But I was like, there's no way I'm not working with these people. And I had great relationships with most of the caregivers that were on. They were the second shift. So there's three shifts of people. And I always showed up for my visits. I would see the people at the end of the first shift and then spend the time with my mom and the people on the second shift. Occasionally I'd see the evening people if I had to go back for something, but neither one of us, mom or me, were great in the evenings. It was not the best time to visit. And if I had to go back, I usually tried to sneak around so my mom didn't see me. But it's just you you get to be back to the relationship you had before. Although my mom thought I was her best friend, which I've said was kind of an upgrade. But yeah, I wasn't ever like 24/7 caregiver for very long. So it's definitely one of the best benefits besides you not losing your mind and your physical health. The other thing, and you said all the ladies befriended your husband, which doesn't surprise me at all. My mom had friends too. There is no way she would have had the social life in my home that she had in memory care.
Yeah.
And I think that was the biggest blessing that I gave her. The one thing I you mentioned was they got him into an activity. They did not do that with my mom. My mom knew what was going on, which was really, really bad. She was pissed off for 6 weeks.
Mm.
It was 6 weeks before she acclimated. And before then, so the day I left her there, she had her dog. People that listen regularly understand that story. And she clung to the dog and shut me and my husband out. I was like, you did not need her to use the words go the bleep away, but that is the body language and the vibe she was sending out full force. She was very unhappy with us. And then I I brought my paternal grandmother who was almost 100 years old and my daughter who was 14 years older than the next grandkid, so she'd been with my mom forever. My mom screamed and wailed and cried so bad my grandmother and my daughter never went back to memory care. It was that dramatic. And then
Yeah.
one day I showed up, she's following this other resident who was demanding to use the phone. Where's the phone book? Which of course cracked me the heck up because who uses the phone in 2017? For the first year my mom was there was a whole bunch of women that just like pounded the counter, had to use the phone. And my mom spotted me and she goes, oh, come with me. I have to help my friend. And I swear to God, every time I tell the story, it still chokes me up. You could have said, hey, Jen, you just won the mega lottery. Here's $1 billion, a bag of diamonds, and a basket full of golden retriever puppies. And that word friend would trump that every day. And from that day forward, she was fine.
Yeah.
She befriended two other Diane. So there was Diane, and other Diane. No confusion there.
Yeah. Right. How easy is that for them all? I
Oh,
know
yeah, yeah.
they told me don't come back for 2 weeks. You can call, you can, whatever you want to do, but it's too confusing for them because we have to acclimate them into this environment. So don't come back for another 2 weeks because then they'll be really, really confused. So I waited 2 weeks. It was really hard. And I went to see him and he kept on calling me Robert. That was his name. Ah, Robert, Robert, Robert. Oh, blah, 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 blah. And I knew his body language. I knew what he was saying. He was telling me that he wanted money, which I mean, why would he need money there was beyond me, but wanted money and he wanted to go to work. So I said to him at the end of the visit, okay, I'm going to give you some money and your work called and you can go in on Monday. And he was so excited. He jumped up. He wanted to run and tell, the caregivers. He wanted to run and tell his buddies that he was, it was all gibber, right? What he at that point. But he was just so excited, And then I was like, okay, bye. So when I would go to visit him, um, it was like he was, he'd have like his arm around, a little gal, and they'd be waving to me. Wow. It was cute and it was funny. And I didn't find it heartbreaking because I knew that he was in the best place possible. And I knew that we had had our life together. And, this was another, unfortunately, a chapter for him. He certainly didn't deserve this, but I just knew it was the best place for him. And it is a hard, really, really hard decision. And it can be very, very expensive, but if you can do it, it really is. Because even when you hire people, sometimes they show up, sometimes they don't. And I found that
Yeah.
really hard for me doing my job because I'd be, you know, showing people homes or doing open houses. And you'd call and you'd say, oh, you're not here yet. Oh, I thought you wanted me like at whatever time. You're like, oh gosh, no. Oh, I can't come. And you're like, oh dear. So you're
Yeah.
trying, the juggle all the time. But yeah, it's a hard grind on caregivers for sure. And we just it's going to get worse and worse as time goes on because more and more people, do need care, right? And
Yeah. I wish we had a lot better, more options, better options because, high priced memory care is out of reach for so many all over, North America. So it's
Yeah.
challenging. But you mentioned they told you not to come back for 2 weeks. And early in 2024, there was some social media chatter about how you should avoid places that tell you things like that. And I was like, yeah, I think I agree with that. And then I talked to Max Sherman, and I will link his episode in the show notes. He knew that he and his wife were aging, her Alzheimer's was progressing, and he knew that at some point they were going to need, both of them were going to need care. He was going to need more help. He would need help, with some of his daily stuff. So he moved them into assisted living, which was the smartest thing he could have done because he fell and shattered his femur. And so his children were forced to move mom from the assisted living portion of the community to the memory care. And they told him not to come, I think, for a month. And his story, they met when she was 15, he was 17. Just to kind of give you guys a little teaser, they met in jail.
Oh.
They were doing ministry, but yes, it's like 15 and 17-year-olds and they met in jail. It's like that's a great way to start a story.
What up, bumps?
So they'd always been very independent, but together very much a team. And they said she needs to create a new routine in memory care. And if you come, it will prevent her from doing that. Because when I read his book and he talked about how, oh, they said not to come for a month. I mean, I was literally like up in arms, pitchforks and torches ready because I was like, oh, this is all wrong. And he started going and having like breakfast or dinner or then both. He would talk on the phone with her a couple times a day, and then COVID happened. So they were acclimating into a new together in memory care, and then COVID happened and he got kicked back out. And I was like, oh my gracious. But when we talked and when you listened to his episode, he was like, that was exactly what we both needed. And I was like, oh. So I had to really rethink the whole acclimating them to memory care, because I think if they had done with my mom like you had your husband, where they got her active with other ladies, even just sitting around shooting the breeze, because that's what she really liked to do. She ended up eating a meal by herself. I mean, the whole thing was really kind of a tragic introduction to memory care. And then I showed up a couple days later and she's pissed off at me. It was just like it was ugly for 6 weeks. So I think
Yeah.
if I didn't go for 2 or 3, maybe she would have acclimated a little sooner. Maybe she wouldn't have been quite so hysterical about visits. Who knows? It's too late to find
Yeah,
out
I mean,
now.
you can't would have, should have, could have. You can't kind of live your life like that. But for people who are looking out there, um, uh, and also if you can't go to visit all the time, that's okay too. Like I couldn't do that. He was in it during COVID, so I couldn't
Mm.
go to visit him, but I could see him through the window. So I would take, we have little dogs, and I would take the little dog, but he wasn't, he was looking at the floor and they were bringing up his face, and like he was so out of it. That was really a benefit for me to see him and not for him because he was so far gone. And it would rip my heart like apart every time. I'd be sitting in the car weeping for like a half an hour. And I thought, okay, I can't, I'm shattered. I can't keep doing this. Like, so then I call and make sure he's doing okay. And because it was a lot of work for them to get him to a window, and I didn't want to put them through all of that. Because, we weren't allowed to visit, right, during COVID times. So there was all these new rules and everything was different. So yeah, you just got to be gentle with yourself, I think, no matter what you're going through.
Yeah, for
You
real.
got to be kind to yourself because there's a lot of, people out there that might not be as generous with their kindness, and you can't, like you can't listen to them,
Yeah,
you
until
know?
they've walked in your shoes,
Yeah.
just ignore them. And I retell my story and Max's story because and this was like a year ago. I was totally in agreement. Oh my God, if they tell you you can't visit for 2 weeks, avoid that place like the plague. But then after talking to Max and hearing the why it was important for that separation for them. Now that might not have benefited my mom and I as much as it did him and his wife, whose name is almost slipping my mind. She had two names, so it's double challenging for me. You just have to make your own way. And I only visited once a week, and I used to go for like 3, 4 hours. It was a long haul. And there was one day I finally had to step away and use the ladies' room, and I came back, and my mom's like, "Oh, hi, what are you doing here?" And I was like, "Oh crap, the clock just reset and I was about to leave. Like I can't leave now because she thinks I just, oh, this
Oh,
sucks." So I learned not to go for as long. And I always said, okay, this is a week. I'm gonna really buckle down and get all this work done like Tuesday, Wednesday, so I can go Thursday afternoon. I always went Monday afternoons after a meeting. It's already out of the house, so it was really easy to go. I'm gonna go on Thursdays. And it never happened. I never visited more than once a week. And I had countless guests and experts, other caregivers, doctors, everybody. They're like, you should go more frequently for less time. Like if you're going for 2 or 3 hours, go once a week or go for an hour 3 times a week. I'm like, that doesn't work very well for my schedule. I mean, yes, I could have rearranged my entire life, but it just, I don't know. I to the gym in the morning, showered, dressed, and then I worked. And it just,
well,
you
you
know,
have to, again, like you have to do what's best for you. It's not because experts say it. You have to do what's best for you and what works for you and your family. And if that works for you, that worked for you, then that worked for you. Again, you got to be gentle with yourself and understand everybody has their limits, right? And
yep.
we are heroes without the cape,
Yeah.
but we do have our limitations. We just do the best that we can do. That's the only thing you can do.
I did learn at the end that like shorter visits, so my mom passed away March of 2020. So I got to miss all the COVID stuff that you went through, thankfully. So the Christmas, like the December, but December 2019, I finally got to the point where like I can't take this. She would get really agitated very easily. I mean, like just the just an odd look on your face, or I don't know, maybe if you
You don't know
hiccuped or
what sets
something.
them off, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah, I
then the
remember that
whole
too.
visit has just gone into the bucket. And I would pick her up, take her into, get her into my car, which was always a challenge, drive around the building to the main entrance to the assisted living, take her to the assisted living dining room. They had the best food, really good portions for older people. Just a little small for me. I always tried to make it work because I'm like, hey, a little less is not going to kill me. But I'd always be hungry before I got home. And we would visit for, 45 minutes. I'd put her back in the car, drive her around, literally like an hour. And we were both perfectly fine. I could go about my week. There was times when I would visit for, 2, 3 hours, and I would just feel like Eeyore with the dark cloud over my head. And, try doing really nice, beautiful family portraits or graduation portraits when you feel like the whole world sucks, when you just have this negative vibe coming off you. It's like, it's not beneficial. So I did finally learn. But like you said, it's like you have to figure out what works for you. And, you know, I'm not sure my mom knew 5 minutes after I was gone that I'd been there. So it was like, does she know that I don't come that often? I
Yeah,
come more than
no,
other
they don't.
people.
No,
So,
no, they don't. And they're so good at these facilities, helping them. And they're trained. They're experts. They're trained for this. So they know how to manage and handle them on particular situations and keeping them busy and letting them have their downtime and all that sort of stuff. So, if you can, it's probably the best possible place for them to be when I was going to say you'll know yourself, but sometimes you don't know yourself. You know what I mean? Because you're just pushing yourself to keep on doing what you think you're doing and what is the best thing for that person. But you have to think of what is the best thing for you and your family, your little nucleus, right?
right. And
Is that
and too many people make the promise, I'll never put you in one of those places, and they don't know what those places really offer. So I want to ask one last question before we suck up any more time of our listeners. Do you feel like it made it easier that the neurologist was like, you need to do this, you make this phone call, I make this phone call, and like literally, it doesn't sound like you had 5 seconds to even contemplate, do I really want to do this? It just sounds like you were just whoosh, whisked right into the decision. Are you
Um,
glad that you didn't have time to mull and
well,
contemplate?
I you have to do your homework like in order to for Canada and US is different, but in order to get help I would have to you know visit these different facilities, right, and talk to as many people as possible and kind of interview them, so whenever that time is going to happen, because with dementia it's going to eventually happen, I knew where I wanted to kind of place him, I guess. So I did like, all my homework and an investigation beforehand. So it wasn't as if this was all new to me, but thinking that he was going to go in, yeah, that was totally new. So I was very appreciative of her seeing that I desperately needed that help and saying, this is going to be your only option because if you want to survive you, this is what you're going to have to do. And as I said, he was getting, persnickety, he was getting a little bit more aggressive. You know, they always said, okay, like when I would ask them, they'd say, oh, just take a step back. Don't lean forward with him. Take a step back, like slowly kind of walk out of the room so you protect yourself, right? Because you don't know how they're going to react to certain things or what'll set them off or anything like that. So, as that disease progresses, you do see more of that. Now, with some people, there's none of that. They're
Right.
just very happy and they smile and, everything is okay for them. But for a lot of people, you don't know it's not them, is what you have to keep on remembering. You don't know how that disease is going to affect them. So I am glad that she did that for me because um, I slept. I think I went home that night and I think I slept. I think it was like from 8 o'clock at night till like 8 or 9 the next morning, which I had never like in for years. I was always up every couple of hours, like helping him, guiding him to the washroom, helping him, wipe and all that kind of stuff. It was like I was like woke up like a zombie. So, and it took years for me to heal, after all of that I did go through. So it did take a few years for me to heal. And life does get better, and you remember the good times and you remember all the wonderful things. I kind of live my life with gratitude. So I learned how to do that. That's why the book is called Forgiving the Man Who Forgot Grateful Gratitude Attitude, because that really is how you have to live, no matter how hard or challenging or whatever you're going through. You do have to be grateful for those times, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're not, then you're just, you're coasting through life as an angry person, and you can't live a life like that. So, but yeah, no,
Nope,
I'm
that's
very
toxic to your brain.
right. Exactly.
So
Exactly.
is stress. So I'm very glad that this neurologist, this doctor, basically gave you permission to make the decision that needed to be made.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because it's not easy when everybody is looking at you like, that's not what she wanted. Why are you going that? Hello? No. Okay. That was what I went through. I had
Yeah.
to
Oh, yeah.
bring
And
everybody
people were mad
along.
at me. People were mad at me for doing what I did. They were very, 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 very upset with me that I put him into a memory care facility. They were very angry. I heard a lot about that, but I was just like, you know what? I had to do it. I have to do it. It's the best thing for him. He's getting the best care, and it is what it is. So, but
Doctor says.
yeah, exactly. That was my RX.
Yeah, I was gonna say that would I would hope that would help. But people being angry for you choosing memory care, that's like a whole other episode.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly.
So I always link the book in the show notes. So you guys can just go. It's a hot link. It'll take you right to Amazon. One of these days I'll get a deal going with good, is it Good Books? Something like that. And that will be even better. But I really appreciate you sharing your story and talking with me about memory care and the benefits to everybody, because I think more people need to hear it. And hopefully, I have a business degree, so maybe if there's more demand for these kind of services, we'll start getting more options. And
Right. And
then
it's not a
some,
stigma, right? It's definitely something that's required. So yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much.
you're welcome.
Thanks for doing what you're doing. You're helping so many people.
Thank you.